Hello and welcome to Getting Your Money's Worth, the show that focuses on value. I'm Judith West, and our guest today is Doug Turetsky, Communications Director and Chief of Staff for Independent Budget Office. I had to do because I had a very hard time getting the word independent out.
It's an important word in our name. Thank you for having me here.
And to tell you the truth, that's why one of the reasons I had you here, Getting Your Money's Worth. It's very hard to trust any budget data anymore that anybody says, and the word independent really made me stop and think about you. Number one, tell us, in a short amount of time, what you do, and how do you stay independent?
Our role is to provide the public and elected officials with accurate, clear, and nonpartisan, objective information about the city's spending and revenues, and do independent revenue projections separate from the mayor, separate from the city council. It's a very unusual position, but we are in fact a city agency, a public city agency.
Who funds you?
You do, the taxpayers. The way we were set up, it goes back to the 1989 charter change. We have a guaranteed line in the city budget, no less than 10% of the mayor's budget office. So that by guaranteeing that budget line, we don't have to get involved every year to year in sort of the back and forth over bargaining for our own support. If we put out a report or uttered some words that the mayor didn't like or a council member or council members didn't like, they can cut our budget, but they can't because we have a guaranteed budget line. That in fact, it was raised this summer when the state legislature increased our role, or added to our role, and we now have a role over monitoring education. It was part of the renewal of mayoral control in the city.
But you don't have a role over monitoring the state?
No, just the city. We're a city agency. Our job is the city.
Okay. Too bad they so they need you in Albany. But yet you get your data from. How do you gather it, in a word, from other agencies? Who talks to you?
There's a very strong provision in the city charter that allows us access to city data, budget data, other data that's necessary for us to do our job. We have access to the city's financial management system, the online system, to get data, to get budget data. And early on, when then Mayor Giuliani didn't like the potential threat of somebody looking over his shoulder and perhaps disagreeing with him, tried to first defund and also deny data that we requested, we went to court, and we have a very strong court order backing up our right to information.
Right. So you're doubly reinforced for the word independent. So let me ask you something. We've come through. Lots of folks are disappointed. They've thought that the recovery would be a little stronger now in 2010. I've read that when there is a sharp recession, that very often the rebound is very strong. Also, but it doesn't seem that historical that piece of history is happening now.
I'm not an economist, but
Nor am I.
But I often hear from Ronnie Lowenstein, who's the director of the Independent Budget Office and an economist, that no two recessions are the same.
Okay.
They go through different kinds of processes. And sometimes what you have is one with a slow recovery. Sometimes you have a sharper recovery. Then you go down again and then go up. Thinking about graphs, W's and U's. There's different. So there's different responses. Our economists had been forecasting a slow recovery, and so far that it seems to be on track of the way they've looked at it.
Right.
Yes.
Will New York come back? Will New York come back and be the heyday it was before? Are good times just around the corner, or will we ever get back to where we were?
I don't know that I would say good times just around the corner, and I wouldn't say that we've necessarily. I don't, how broadly you're defining that. That we ever lost our place. We still are a preeminent city, not just in the U.S., but really in the world. We obviously not creating the kinds of budget. If we're going to bring it back to the city budget, we're not creating the kinds of budget surpluses we were a few years ago. But the city is still doing, compared to a lot of other places, pretty well. Doesn't mean we don't have problems, we don't have budget shortfalls, we don't have issues to address, but the city was not as hit as hard as a lot of other places.
And I think it's fair to say, too, that we have a pretty responsible, fiscally prudent city government, or at least certainly the leader.
One thing, part of IBO's independent role is we don't
give
a thumbs up or thumbs down to particular.
Right.
We try to present the facts and let people decide what they think is correct.
Right. Yeah. But the facts, as you say, the facts have shown that New York City has managed to stay above the fray.
Right. The mayor and the council, seeing the economic problems, because they were really national first before they hit the city. Seeing those coming, took steps to put money away, prepay or pay off some bonds early, and otherwise put some money
bank
some money away to help to use the surplus that the city was enjoying at that time to help smooth out some of the problems ahead. The issue the city faces now is that we really don't have much of a surplus left.
And revenues are down.
Revenues are down, not by our estimation, not quite as far as down as the mayor had expected, but they are still down.
Good news.
That's certainly good news, but not quite as far down as the mayor.
Right. You know, I don't know much about it, but I keep reading, and it's on a national scale, and I see the unemployment rate in New York City is about the same as it is nationally, isn't it?
Correct.
About 10% or so,
roughly,
10,
yeah.
whatever. So I don't know much, but tell me something. How do you create jobs? I don't really understand it. When so many services have been cut back, how do you take people off the streets and give them jobs?
There are any number of avenues that people or government goes down. Some is direct job creation. Think of FDR and the depression, direct work programs like that. Some people argue for tax cuts or tax breaks or payroll breaks to encourage employers to hire. There's job training programs. The mayor did his State of the City speech earlier this week.
Right.
He talked about fostering small business, making easier for small businesses to get the permits and application processes through, so they can get their businesses up and running faster. All those kinds of ways are the things that people look to.
Are all those things happening now? In your role, do you see it happening? Or is there a lag?
Well, there are pieces of all of that. Certainly, on a federal level, the stimulus plan was some significant piece of that's exactly what it did by providing money to for infrastructure projects. You were putting construction workers to work, but providing money, for example, to the state of New York, and then having it flow down to the city, preventing layoffs of teachers and other public employees. So yes, it was doing that.
It was doing that, though. It's very hard to get America. Though folks feel that with the stimulus program, there was an expectation that unemployment would be lower than it is today, and it isn't.
There were certainly people arguing at the time that actually the stimulus that the stimulus plan put into place wasn't enough, wasn't big enough to drive unemployment down to the levels perhaps some were expecting or hoping. That said, probably we'd be looking at even higher unemployment. Almost certainly we'd be looking at higher unemployment if we hadn't done what we've done.
What are the job categories that have been hit the most, Doug?
Well, certainly in the city, what's borne the brunt of it numerically is the financial industry. Our projection is that by the full drop of employment in the city, which will probably hit bottom at the middle of this year, we'll probably have lost about 45,000 financial sector jobs.
And there are lots.
And they won't really start coming back until we don't think until about 2012, middle of 2012.
And there are lots of folks that think, good news. You made it. You created it. you got it.
Yeah, I mean, there's some. There's certainly a populist backlash against the financial sector. But for New York City, we have to remember it's a preeminent industry here. It's about maybe 5% of employment, but generates probably 5-6 times that in the tax revenue for the city, directly and indirectly. So it's really a major revenue source for the city. So whatever one may feel about the industry per se, you have to recognize that they help fuel a lot of the services the city provides.
Are there other urban areas of the country that have an office such as yours, independent budget office? Or is this unique to New York?
We are pretty unique. San Diego, for example, has a I think it's called the Legislative Analyst Office, or San Diego Budget Analyst Office, but they report to the City Council. They're an arm of the City Council, much like the Congressional Budget Office is an arm of Congress
in Washington.
In Washington. We're very unique in that we report neither to the legislature nor the executive, the mayor, in our case.
So, and there's also a good rapport. They accept your data pretty well.
They accept it. At times, the mayor will argue against it. Say, what are they doing? What are they saying? Are they crazy? And at times, he'll embrace it. And in fact,
but you guys stand independently.
We stand independently and stand behind the work that we do.
Yeah, well, good for you. I don't want to be in a comfortable position, but New York State, wow, they could really use somebody like you guys.
Is
there a movement to do something for New York State like you do for the city? There's been talk
for several years about creating an independent budget office for New York State. There's been various discussions, has not passed yet, but the discussions are ongoing.
You know what surprises me? How families, people in business, seem to be much clearer and more informed about creating their own budget than these legislators are about doing something for the state or for the city. The disconnect between the government budgeting and individual budgeting surprises me.
Yeah, it
mystifies me, I guess is a better word.
It exists in very different realms. Your home budget, your personal budget, doesn't have the same political overlay.
Well,
you may have some differences with a partner or something, but
in a word, how much of budgeting is political?
I don't think there's a way to put a number on it, a percentage number on it. But budget by their natural being, whether it's your personal budget or the budget of the $60 billion budget of the city of New York, it's largely a process of trade-offs. If we can afford this, we only have the pie is only so big. How do you divide it up? And you make the trade-offs. Okay, we want to spend it on this, but that means we don't have as much for this over here, and you have to make the decisions, and that's ultimately where the politics comes in.
Yeah, I suppose the legislators are concerned with the squeaky wheel and their own legacy.
Certainly, that will figure into it in times, but I wouldn't always be. I appreciate your skepticism, but at the same time, I think there's different influences at different times.
Okay, well, I'm glad because we never like to end a note on budgeting the too skeptical.
Right.
Yeah. So New Yorkers have you to thank because you're working, you're giving data to help keep the city honest.
That's going back to the FDR allusion before or metaphor. I like to think of ourselves as kind of an honest broker.
Good, and we can certainly use that kind. Thanks for being on, Doug.
Thank you.
I'm Judith West. You're watching Getting Your Money's Worth. We just interviewed Doug Turetsky, Communications Director for Independent Budget Office. Independent, good word. Thanks for watching.